October 12, 2023. Deep within the Chernobyl exclusion zone, a desolate landscape still radiating the invisible scars of a forgotten apocalypse, Major Valery Krylov moved through the skeletal remains of the Red Forest. The trees, once an eerie, rust-colored testament to atomic fury, now stood as grey, ghostly sentinels rising from soil still hot with strontium-90. Krylov, a seasoned military dosimetrist, led a small, specialized team tasked with mapping residual hotspots for the Zone Management and Agency for Radiation Safety. His personal Geiger counter, a rugged military-grade device, usually a reliable harbinger of danger, had begun to behave erratically. For the past hour, it had not merely spiked in dangerous areas, it had been emitting a faint, rhythmic thump, thump, thump sound, a cadence entirely alien to its usual operational hum. It was not the crackle of alpha or beta particles, nor the steady whine of gamma radiation. It sounded inexplicably like footsteps. As Krylov paused near a particularly gnarled dead pine, the tapping intensified, coming not from his device, but from the air itself, swirling around him, cold and impossibly close. He glanced at his two team members, Sergeant Oleg Volkov and junior dosimetrist Private Anya Petrova, who stood frozen, their own Geiger counters silenced, their eyes wide with an identical apprehension. Then the distinct metallic clank of a boot on concrete echoed from behind a cluster of mutated trees, a sound utterly out of place in this deserted wilderness. Krylov spun, his hand instinctively reaching for his sidearm. For a fleeting second, through the shimmering heat haze that seemed to rise from the irradiated ground, he saw it. A tall, indistinct figure in what appeared to be a faded green military uniform, its silhouette rippling like disturbed water. The figure stood for a moment, eerily still, before slowly raising an arm, its hand pointing towards the shattered remnants of reactor number 4, then silently dissolving into the irradiated mist. Anya gasped, dropping her counter. The ambient radiation levels for a moment had dropped to near background levels before surging back with a violent, sickening crackle. Krylov felt a cold dread settle in his stomach. This was not residual radiation. This was something else entirely. Something was still moving in the Red Forest. To truly comprehend the unsettling reality of the Chernobyl exclusion zone, one must first grasp the scale of the disaster that birthed it. On April 26, 1986, at 1:23:45 a.m., an ill-fated safety test at reactor number 4 of the Chernobyl nuclear power plant in the Ukrainian Soviet Socialist Republic, then part of the Soviet Union, led to a catastrophic explosion. The blast blew the 2,000-ton reactor lid clean off, releasing a massive plume of radioactive isotopes cesium-137, iodine-131, strontium-90, plutonium-239 into the atmosphere. The immediate aftermath was a scene of unparalleled chaos and heroism. Firefighters, unaware of the lethal radiation, battled the blazes. Military reservists, conscripts, and civilian volunteers, later known as liquidators, were rapidly mobilized, numbering over 600,000 individuals, many forced into unimaginable acts of sacrifice. They built the initial sarcophagus over the ruined reactor, cleared radioactive debris by hand from the roof, and decontaminated surrounding areas, often with inadequate protection. These individuals, some dying within weeks from acute radiation sickness, others suffering long-term health consequences, were the first human shield against an invisible enemy. The 30-kilometer exclusion zone was established, encompassing the ghost city of Pripyat, built for the plant workers, and hundreds of smaller villages. Over 100,000 people were evacuated, leaving behind their lives, their homes, their very identities. The Red Forest, located immediately downwind from the reactor, absorbed some of the highest doses of radiation, causing the pine trees to die and turn a vivid reddish-brown, giving the area its chilling name. Even decades later, despite the outward appearance of returning nature, the zone remains a paradox, a vibrant ecosystem thriving on land saturated with dangerous radionuclides, a testament to both nature's resilience and humanity's folly. The structures, the abandoned personal belongings, the very air itself are saturated with a silent, unseen menace. This unprecedented event created a landscape utterly unique on Earth, a place where the conventional laws of physics and biology seem to bend, a place ripe for anomalies. It is this very anomaly that leads us to a different kind of horror, one rooted not just in historical fact, but in the peculiar intersection of cutting-edge physics and ancient folklore. While traditional Slavic beliefs like those of the Leshy, forest spirits, or Domovoi, house spirits, speak of entities intrinsically linked to natural environments and homes, the Chernobyl disaster introduced a new, terrifying dimension. How does a landscape saturated with high-energy particles interact with the very fabric of reality and, by extension, with the remnants of human experience? Modern theories in theoretical physics, though highly speculative, sometimes propose that extreme energy events could, in theory, create localized distortions in space-time or even leave residual imprints on reality itself. Imagine the sheer, raw energy of a nuclear meltdown, the instantaneous vaporization of matter, the sudden cessation of thousands of human lives and memories. Could such an event, a literal tearing of the physical world, leave behind more than just radioactive isotopes? In some fringe theories, it's suggested that powerful, traumatic events, especially those involving sudden, widespread death, can somehow etch a residual energy signature onto the environment. This is not traditional haunting by a disembodied soul, but rather an echo, a fragment of an event replaying itself like a recording. The environment, saturated with energy, acts as a sort of canvas. For Chernobyl, this idea takes on a terrifying twist. The radiation itself, a constant, high-energy flux, is the medium. It doesn't just kill or mutate, it preserves, it distorts, it twists reality. It could act as a catalyst, manifesting these residual imprints not as faint wisps, but as tangible sensory anomalies, sudden cold spots, disembodied voices, flickering lights, even visual distortions of past events or individuals. These are not benevolent or malevolent spirits in the classical sense, but rather phantoms or echoes, fragments of the past forever bound to the irradiated present, repeating their last actions, their last commands, their last agonies. They are the spectral liquidators, the trapped residents, the lost souls of Pripyat, condemned to an eternal, radioactive limbo, still fulfilling the invisible duties of a world that no longer exists. And in the most terrifying of concepts, perhaps the radiation itself, over decades, has given birth to something new, something else, entities not born of life, but of the very destructive force that ravaged the land, a new form of Waldgeist, but one born of the atomic age, guarding its strange, silent domain. Major Valery Krylov was a man of logic and discipline, a former military engineer whose career had shifted to radiological protection after a classified incident he rarely spoke of. His team included Sergeant Oleg Volkov, a burly, pragmatic veteran who trusted his equipment more than his instincts, and Private Anya Petrova, a bright but inexperienced junior dosimetrist whose academic background had not prepared her for the eerie realities of the zone. Their mission on that fateful October of 2023 was a routine, albeit extended, survey of the Red Forest, checking for long-term radiation dissipation patterns and identifying new hotspots. The incident on October 12th, with the phantom figure and the synchronized Geiger counter anomaly, was only the beginning. Krylov, shaken but determined, attributed it to visual distortion in the high gamma areas and shared stress-induced hallucination. His official report that evening mentioned only anomalous readings and brief, localized atmospheric disturbances. Oleg Volkov, a man who prided himself on his unwavering composure, scoffed. "My counter doesn't tap, Major. And I've never seen a heat haze that wore boots." Anya, however, remained unnervingly quiet, her eyes haunted. "I felt the cold, Major," she whispered later, privately, to Krylov. "And the air, it smelled like ozone and something burning." Like a storm, but without lightning. Over the next few days, as they ventured deeper into the Red Forest, the phenomena intensified. On October 15th, while traversing a particularly dense thicket of gnarled trees, their handheld radios, usually silent except for static, began to emit faint, garbled speech. It wasn't the Zone Authority or their own base camp. It was a cacophony of Russian voices crackling with interference, yet discernible. "Second unit, move to Sector Gamma 7, Liquidator, report. Water. We need water." They were disjointed phrases, orders, cries of distress, voices from decades past, laced with an unnerving urgency. Ben Carter, a civilian contractor responsible for their communication equipment, a man of profound skepticism and technical expertise, swore there was no logical explanation. "It's not a signal bleed, Major. There's nothing broadcasting on these frequencies here. It's like a replay. An echo, somehow, within the electromagnetic spectrum itself." His own cutting-edge comms suite, designed to filter out interference, was overwhelmed by the spectral chatter. The visual anomalies became more frequent. On October 18th, while setting up a remote sensor array near the reactor perimeter, Krylov observed a brief, flickering image of a man in a white hazmat suit, his face obscured by a respirator, standing perfectly still amongst the trees. The figure was translucent, like a double exposure, and radiated an intense focused energy, but his Geiger counter remained oddly silent, registering only the background hum. When he blinked, the figure vanished. Oleg Volkov reported similar fleeting glimpses, shadows moving too fast, shapes that appeared to be carrying equipment, then vanished as he tried to focus. Anya, however, saw the clearest images. On October 20th, while inspecting a ruined, abandoned bus stop on the outskirts of Pripyat, she saw a child, a young girl no more than 6 years old, sitting silently on the concrete bench, clutching a faded teddy bear. The child was dressed in 1980s attire, unnaturally clean in the grimy environment. Anya froze. The child looked up, its eyes wide and unblinking, then slowly raised a hand and pointed towards the deserted apartment blocks of Pripyat. "Mama," it whispered, a sound that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. Anya screamed, and the image flickered, distorted, and dissolved. Her dosimeter, which had been silent, suddenly shrieked at dangerous levels. The team's psychological state began to deteriorate. Oleg, usually unflappable, became irritable and paranoid, constantly checking his flanks, convinced he was being watched. He began to report an inexplicable chill, even when the temperature was mild, complaining of the cold spots that followed him. Anya, deeply traumatized by the vision of the child, refused to enter any abandoned buildings, her sleep plagued by nightmares of echoing whispers and ghostly figures. Krylov himself, despite his best efforts to maintain control, started experiencing vivid olfactory hallucinations, the distinct smell of burning graphite, ozone, and a faint, sweet, metallic scent like fresh blood. He knew these were the smells associated with severe radiation exposure and the immediate aftermath of the Chernobyl explosion. It was as if his mind was being fed sensory data from a past long gone. On October 22nd, while surveying a heavily contaminated area known as the Liquidator's Hill, a site where the most radioactive debris from the reactor roof had been buried, their equipment went completely haywire. Their Geiger counters registered off the charts, then dropped to 0, only to spike again in a chaotic rhythm. Ben Carter's high-precision spectral analysis equipment, designed to identify specific isotopes, began displaying nonsensical data, geometric patterns, flashes of impossible colors, even what looked like distorted human faces superimposed on the spectral readouts. "It's not just radiation," Ben stammered, his face pale. "It's something else. It's like the radiation is being channeled. It's creating anomalies. These aren't ghosts, these are echoes. And something is controlling the echoes." The culmination of these events occurred on October 24th. The team was attempting to establish a temporary monitoring station deeper in the Red Forest, near a particularly active hotspot. As they were setting up their gear, the pervasive hum that had accompanied them for days intensified, resonating deep within their bones. The trees themselves seemed to writhe, their dead branches swaying in a wind that didn't exist. Suddenly, the forest around them was filled with figures. Not translucent, flickering images, but solid, unmistakable forms, men in late Soviet-era military uniforms, their faces gaunt, eyes wide and fixed, their movements stiff and repetitive. They were liquidators, carrying shovels, brooms, and lead shields. They moved in precise, almost robotic patterns, sweeping non-existent debris, pushing invisible radioactive particles. They were completely silent, their faces devoid of emotion, yet their presence exuded an overwhelming sense of duty and desperate, eternal purpose. Krylov estimated at least 50, perhaps more, of these phantoms in their immediate vicinity. They paid no attention to the living team, locked into their eternal task. But then, one of them, a man with a distinctive scar above his left eye, paused his movements, turned his head slowly, and looked directly at Krylov. His eyes, though empty, burned with a faint greenish light. He raised a hand, pointing not towards the reactor this time, but directly at Krylov, then at Oleg, then at Anya. And in a voice that was both a whisper and a scream, echoing in their minds, not through their comms, he uttered a single, chilling word: "Prikaz," command. The figure turned back to its endless, futile sweeping. The team, paralyzed with terror, stumbled back, leaving their equipment behind. They ran, scrambling through the forest, the rhythmic thump, thump, thump of spectral boots pursuing them, the scent of ozone and burning graphite growing stronger with every step, until they finally broke free of the Red Forest's grip and reached the relative safety of the outer zone perimeter. The harrowing experiences of Major Krylov's team quickly reached the highest echelons of zone management, triggering an internal, highly classified investigation. General Vasily Kozlov, a stern, retired military strategist who now oversaw the zone's security, initially dismissed their reports as severe cases of radiation-induced psychosis, a common enough affliction in the area. However, the consistent accounts from Krylov, the detailed logs from Ben Carter's malfunctioning equipment, and the sheer terror evident in Oleg and Anya's testimonies could not be easily ignored. General Kozlov, though publicly maintaining the official stance of radiation-related phenomena, quietly brought in an unconventional expert, Dr. Katya Rostova. Dr. Rostova was a physicist by training, but her academic career had taken an unusual turn into what she termed quantum anomalous phenomena, the study of how extreme energy events might affect the fabric of reality itself. She had been a vocal, though marginalized, proponent of theories suggesting that Chernobyl wasn't just a physical disaster, but a metaphysical one. In her unpublished monograph, The Chronospatial Distortion of Exclusion Zones, Dr. Rostova posited that the unique combination of raw nuclear energy, instantaneous mass casualties, and the long-term presence of high radiation had created a localized tear or scar in the space-time continuum. It's not a haunting in the classical sense of disembodied souls, she explained to a skeptical Krylov in a secure debriefing room. Think of it as a vast, decaying, hyper-energetic photograph. The photons, the energy, the very imprints of those final moments, the liquidators, the fleeing residents became embedded in the environment. The radiation, it doesn't just decay, it feeds on these imprints. It acts as a continuous power source, keeping these echoes alive, playing them back. They are not conscious entities in the way we understand them, but residual recordings driven by their last impulses, their final commands, their last fears. Dr. Rostova provided a chilling explanation for each phenomenon. The tapping from the Geiger counters wasn't a malfunction, but the subtle, sympathetic vibration of the device to the omnipresent energetic imprints of the marching liquidators. The voices on the comms were not radio waves, but direct psychic resonance, the trapped echoes attempting to communicate through any available channel. The smell of burning graphite and ozone was a direct sensory feedback from the 1986 event, perpetually imprinted on the air. The phantoms themselves, she argued, were not ghosts, but hyper-realistic, three-dimensional energy manifestations of these echoes, given temporary solidity by the fluctuating radiation fields. The figure pointing to the reactor, Major Krylov? That was a residual command, a liquidator following his final order. The child in Pripyat? A fragment of innocence, eternally searching. And when the phantom looked at you and said prikaz, commanded when it was not a threat. It was a desperate cry from an echo forever compelled to follow orders, perhaps even to recruit others into its eternal loop. She theorized that the Red Forest, being the most intensely irradiated and disturbed area, acted as an epicenter for these anomalies. The dying trees, she suggested, had absorbed and metabolized the radiation in a unique way, becoming a sort of organic conduit, a living memory bank for the tragedy. Dr. Rostova advocated for a complete halt to all human activity in the Red Forest, arguing that any intrusion, any attempt to quantify or contain, merely agitated the residual energies, making the anomalies stronger, more coherent, and potentially more interactive. Her professional analysis, though met with skepticism by some, tilted the understanding of the events firmly from psychological delusion to an unnerving, radiation-induced metaphysical reality. General Kozlov, after listening to Dr. Rostova's impassioned arguments and witnessing Ben Carter's permanent mental deterioration, authorized a new, stricter perimeter around the most active areas of the Red Forest, effectively ceding those zones entirely to the anomalies. the incident within the Red Forest, and the chilling insights provided by Dr. Rostova had profound and lasting consequences for all involved, reshaping their lives and the very perception of the Chernobyl exclusion zone. Major Valery Krylov, though never fully recovering from the trauma, became an ardent, though discreet, supporter of Dr. Rostova's theories. He retired from active duty shortly after the events, his focus shifting from military dosimetry to the quiet academic study of anomalous phenomena, always seeking patterns, always listening for the echoes. He often spoke of a pervasive, low-level dread he could never shake, a sense of unseen eyes watching him from the corners of his vision. Sergeant Oleg Volkov, once the epitome of military pragmatism, spiraled into alcoholism and deep depression. He couldn't reconcile what he had seen with his logical worldview, and the constant feeling of being watched, of being followed by the cold spots, broke him. He passed away prematurely, his official cause of death listed as heart failure, but those who knew him suspected the zone had claimed him in a different way. Private Anya Petrova, the young dosimetrist, found an unexpected calling. Deeply moved by the phantom child she had witnessed, she dedicated her life to documenting the human stories of Chernobyl, particularly those of the children affected by the disaster. She became a humanitarian, working tirelessly to support former residents and their families, her empathy a coping mechanism for the horrors she had faced. She never returned to the zone, haunted by the whisper of Mama and the image of the wide, unblinking eyes. Ben Carter, the tech specialist, never fully recovered from his mental breakdown. He spent his remaining years in a specialized facility, mumbling about the static and the patterns in the noise, his mind a fragmented mirror of the electromagnetic chaos he had witnessed. Officially, all military and scientific reports regarding the anomalous Red Forest incident were immediately classified at the highest level, citing national security implications and the need to prevent public panic. The zone management implemented new, extremely stringent protocols for entry into and research within the Red Forest, designating large sections as absolute no-go zones due to unpredictably high radiation spikes, a convenient, if dishonest, cover for the true nature of the threat. These areas are now patrolled by specialized, heavily armed units whose unspoken mission is not just to keep people out, but to ensure that whatever phenomena occur within remain within. The zone itself, particularly the Red Forest, has entered the realm of modern urban legend and scientific speculation. Stalkers, illegal trespassers who venture into the zone for thrill or profit, tell hushed tales of ghosts of the liquidators, time loops, and residual consciousness within the Red Forest, weaving the official cover-up with their own terrifying experiences. Some claim that the forest itself is conscious, mutated by the radiation into a sentient entity that holds the echoes of its victims captive, eternally replaying the catastrophe. It has become a truly cursed place where the line between past and present, life and death, is constantly blurred by an unseen, pervasive force. Thank you for joining for this exploration of how the devastating power of the Chernobyl disaster may have unleashed a new, terrifying form of haunting. This story serves as a chilling reminder that the consequences of scientific hubris can extend far beyond the physical, warping the very fabric of reality and trapping human souls in a perpetual, radioactive echo. It compels us to confront the terrifying idea that extreme energy events can leave more than just physical scars, creating spectral imprints that are neither truly alive nor truly dead, forever bound to their last commands, their last moments of agony, In a landscape that has become a monument to unintended, unimaginable horror, the Red Forest stands as a stark, silent warning. Some wounds never heal, and some echoes never fade. If you found this exploration into the shadows of history compelling, please consider liking this video, sharing it with those who appreciate the darker corners of our past, and subscribing to Dr. A Whisper of War for more journeys into the unexplained and the unsettling. Your comments and theories are always welcome below. Until next time, remember that in places like Chernobyl, the invisible threats may be far more terrifying than the visible ones.